Magandang araw po sa inyo at welcome sa isa na naman pong episode ng online series ni Inang Pamantasan kung saan ang pagkatuto ay walang hangganan. Ito ang PNU Talks. My name is Christine Lining Bulandus and I will be your learning from home buddy for today's episode entitled Valuing Other Care and Self-Care. I'm an alumna of PNU and I graduated in 2010 with a degree of Bachelor's of Secondary Education major in English with a specialization in reading. I was also part of the Philippine Normal University Debate Society. Currently, I'm completing my Master's of TESOL in the La Trobe University and I am honored to work in the Australian Catholic University as a consultant for students. As educators, our language of love is usually through service and action. Teaching is often considered part of the caring industry, usually focusing on the care for others, or other care, some would call it. I remember in the 1980s there was a TV show called Care Bears. I loved watching that TV show. It was about a group of characters who were bears who lived in a kingdom of caring. That's what it was called. They had symbols on their tummy. Some had a rainbow arc. Some had a sun smiling. Funshine bear, I remember. And there was even a share bear that had a photo of an ice cream, a pink ice cream soda with 2 straws. I've always imbibed and loved that concept of Care Bears. I've always considered myself somewhat a Care Bear myself. Throughout my journey as a teacher, from graduating in PNU in 2010, I started my career teaching in an all-boys school, literature, and being a homeroom advisor. Then I went on to teach for 5 years in an all-girls school, as a literature and grammar teacher, and as a class advisor as well. In those 7 years of experience, in those 4 walls of those classrooms, I understood that those students are different. At the core of it, it's necessary for them to experience the idea of listening with the heart and feeling listened to without being judged. Those 7 years of experience as a classroom advisor and a literature teacher, the stories that were read and shared and the lessons that were learned equipped me to be a qualified education counselor when I moved to Australia. I was responsible to helping international students make informed life decisions, to align their learning goals with their career paths, and help them have a brighter future. These moments were very similar, facing students of different cultures and different nationalities, all with the same narrative, wanting to be listened to and wanting to be heard. Until my present job right now in the Australian Catholic University, I'm responsible to help students, from PhD, postgraduate, undergraduate students, those graduating year 12, and parents alike, to help make them informed decisions, to guide them, to listen with empathy, to converse not only with the stories, but with those that are unsaid. These responsibilities, I have been prepared by the lifelong experience from teaching and being in the education industry. Being an educator is in my blood and in my core, and the responsibilities I hold are all rooted from the passion to want to listen with empathy and make meaningful conversations. Because at the core of any educational institution is the value of relationships and making meaningful encounters with students. My experiences as a classroom advisor or a homeroom advisor prepared me for the life I'm living right now, still guiding students and still advising students, helping them make informed decisions for a brighter and a better future. DepEd follows a homeroom guidance framework. that focuses on 3 different domains: the academic development domain, the personal and social domain, and the career development domain. This framework was guided by the American School Counseling Association, or it follows what they call the ASCA model. Let's look into the first domain, the academic development domain. This domain is based on a couple of theories. Learning theories that include BRUNER'S scaffolding theory, which focuses on the idea that a firm foundation is necessary for students in order for them to fully develop. Understanding that their foundation is strong helps build them up and learn to a level that will reach their maximum potential. Another theory is Piaget's cognitive learning development theory that focuses on the nature and nurture on how cognitive development can be helped and contributed by the realities that students are living in. Complementary to this is the third theory, which is Rousseau's learner-centered theory, which highly focuses on the idea that life experience should be tapped into in order for us to give authentic learning experiences. These life realities and the worlds that students live in are cultural capital, and this cultural capital informs pedagogical decisions. The next domain is the personal and social domain. This focuses on the psychosocial aspect of a learner, looking into their attitudes, their skills, their ideas, their ideologies, how they perceive themselves as part of society as a whole, and how they would want to contribute to the well-being and welfare of the nation and the world in general. The third and last domain is the career development domain. This focuses on what Super would call the development theory, the idea of a student's self-concept, creating and building that self-concept by understanding their strengths and weaknesses, by understanding their passions, and understanding what their ambition is. Career manifestations as evidence through observational knowledge and knowledge set based on their learning cognitively, behaviorally, and effectively. These 3 domains help teachers make a decision in how to holistically form and guide students. But if we were to look at it in a more pedagogical aspect, there is what we call care pedagogy. Muffet Trout in 2012 wrote a book, Making the Moment Matter, Care Theory, for teacher learning. This idea of care theory is rooted in the concept of ethical care by Nell Nodding that focuses on 2 kinds of care. First, care for someone, and second, teaching another to care for someone. These 2 ideas of ethical care is the basis of care pedagogy, as exemplified in teaching and in learning environment. If we were to focus on this idea, what is elemental is looking into the student-teacher relationship. The trust and meaningful rapport that exists between a teacher and a student creates for conversations that allow an understanding beyond just conversation and just transactional relationship. It's a matter of not only teaching to the letter. It's not a question of what to teach, but rather how to teach and how best be understood. The first conversation matters. It's important to start knowing that students want to be listened to and students want to learn the best way they can learn. And that concept of understanding how crucial care pedagogy is in establishing rapport and connection with students truly matters. I remember one of the in-service sessions we had before the start of the school year. I remember looking at the faculty handbook, just curious of what it entails and the responsibilities are of a subject teacher, a homeroom advisor, and at that time, a club moderator. So I was thinking I had 3 different hats to wear in school. And each responsibility always was an action-initiated word. Ensures, assists, guides, in charge of the students under her care. These were the responsibilities that were listed down. Personally, I always thought that these responsibilities were a Herculean task. But what helped me are 3 different and important signposts that I'll be sharing to you. From knowing the concept of care pedagogy and understanding ethical care and care theory in teacher learning, these 3 concrete considerations assist me in thinking of tangible and realistic classroom or even just life application that assists me in empathically understanding other people. Empathizing with another is difficult, but it's a skill that can be learned and can be improved. And these 3 letters, E-A-T, are very simple and have worked for me both on a personal and a professional level in the education industry. 3 simple letters that have helped me in my journey thus far. Don't forget to eat. E, empathic communication. Empathic communication is vital in the care pedagogy or care theory. It focuses the idea of how building rapport and relationships are elemental and crucial in the learning process of students. Often we hear the golden rule, do unto others what you want others to do unto you. And this has been used time and time again in various life situations. One of those days when I was going to work, I was listening to a podcast called My Savvy Psychologist, wherein Dr. Monica Johnson talked about extending that golden rule, wherein she said, treat others as others would want to be treated. For example, when you buy someone a gift, you don't think of what you would want to receive and then buy that. For example, I love books, and I buy a book for my best friend who has no interest in books, but rather loves singing. I wouldn't buy her a book because I wanted to receive it. Rather, I would put myself in her shoes and think of what she would want. Empathic communication focuses on the importance of knowing the other, building the rapport by understanding their context, and not enforcing what you think. Rather, understanding how they think by stepping out of your box and observing and understanding what context and where the student is coming from. The second letter is the letter A. Active listening. Active listening springs from the idea of empathic communication, of perspective taking. Hearing versus listening are 2 very different things. There are some people who hear and wait for their turn to talk without really listening to the other, disregarding the context or the story or narrative told by the other. By listening, we give space of communicating through empathy, looking at their gestures, looking at their facial expressions, looking at how they relay the story with their non-verbal cues and gestures. Not just really showing you understand, but fully being in the present moment, allowing for meaningful conversation to transpire. A student's context is only best understood if one truly listens and not merely hears. The third letter, T. Tones matter. Tones are not merely just the pitches of how high someone's voice is or how low someone's voice is. Tones matter. Specifically, a tip that would be good is looking at the auxiliary verbs and the conditional language used by a student. Am, being. I am feeling sad. I'm quite lost right now. Or looking at other auxiliary verbs that assist for negation. I don't really know what to do next. I don't understand what's happening. Or conditional language. Could it have been better if I did this? Would the decision be different if I didn't do this? Understanding these word choices focuses on the tone of a person, not merely the sound of one's voice, but the deliberate decisions of the words create for a more informed understanding of the person's motivation, the person's context, feelings, emotions, and the general background. In Moffat's book, she furthers this idea of care pedagogy by citing Golami's 2011 study focusing on pedagogical decisions and how learning institutions must be pedagogically flexible. And what does that mean? Looking into two ideas: pedagogical inclusion, which focuses really on the learning developments of students and the learning goals. Year 1s should already know certain letters and word combinations. Or a Year 12 should have already read the classics. The second is pedagogical accommodation. In this sense, the concept of changing or remedying based on the context of a student, based on what the needs of a student are. These two pedagogical considerations help in making flexible and appropriate and consistent to what the context of a student needs. Basing the idea that a classroom or a simple change in the sitting arrangement is a response to the context of a student's needs. The learning activities, the formative assessments, the learning encounters, or simply the manner of presentation of the content or a knowledge-based setting can change or be remedied, accommodating what the student needs, listening to what the student wants and responds to. By creating this safe space of learning, it allows for the teacher and the student to be on the same page without pushing and pulling in different directions. Rather, understanding that we're in a we setup, not an I and a you setup. It creates an idea that it is a platform for values of learners to be put forward and for teachers to truly guide those values and potentially encourage students to discover more and unearth the potential and reach the maximum level of development and learning, both academically, behaviorally, on a personal and a professional manner. This is what lifelong learning and genuine encounters in a school should be. In understanding the idea of other care through the lens of care pedagogy, the main responsibility lies with the teacher. But isn't it a little bit too much for a teacher to take on? Lately, we've been hearing a lot about quiet quitting. Silently giving up, but still day in and day out, going into work, going into the classroom, doing the daily grind. Lately, teacher retention has been really low. Teacher burnout has been really high. With the cost of inflation, with the pandemic, these are the realities teachers are faced. In the same way that we in the caring industry have to value other care, it's important and pivotal to focus as well on the concept of self-care. Self-care has been such a buzzword recently. But let's just try to define what self-care really is. Same as preparing lesson plans, preparing proposals, or preparing presentations. Self-care also requires preparation and planning. Sandra, in her 2013 book, Care in Education, defines self-care. She puts it in a beautiful way. We must arise from the ground of wisdom. She's saying that we are all sums of our experiences, and from those experiences, we find nuggets of wisdom that allow us to rise and find what care we respond to, what self-care we need. In my experience so far, there are 3 R's that help me in discovering my self-care. In an industry that I constantly need to empathize with other people and communicate and guide students day in and day out, these 3 R's have guided me in finding my own safe space separate from my professional work and demands. And let me share this with you. The first R stands for recognizing your roles. Roles with a big S. For example, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm a cousin, I'm a best friend, I'm an employee. These are just some of the responsibilities I hold. For others, they're mothers, fathers, mother-in-laws, or they have mother-in-laws and sisters-in-laws, grandmothers. They have different hats that they wear. That means different responsibility for every role that they play. It's important that we recognize the roles we have in life, understanding what and how far we've gone, the daily achievements of the responsibilities that we are able to carry out. This is necessary for us to reconcile with. Understanding our context, understanding where we stand. And we can only do that when we take a moment to recognize the roles that we play. By then, you see how much you have on your plate, how much one can take, and how much one has already been bearing. The second R, reflecting. After recognizing the roles that you play, it's important to pause, to take a moment and just pause and reflect on what life has been giving you. You're able to look at yourself from head to toe, knowing how tired you are, knowing how much energy you have left, or knowing what other goals you have to achieve in the process. The third R stands for responding. Now, after recognizing your roles and reflecting, pausing is important. Now the action component is the next step. Responding. Responding to the voice and the conversation you had with yourself. What can I do for myself? What moment do I need to take in order for me to find a sense of fulfillment? It doesn't have to be grand. It doesn't have to be big. Could be as simple as having coffee every day at 9 a.m. uninterrupted. Could be as simple as every 2 weeks pruning the garden in the backyard uninterrupted with music playing and having a playlist that's so calming, full of your favorite songs and artists. It could be every month going out to watch a movie with a friend or a loved one. Or Fridays out once every 2 months, karaoke night, just singing your lungs out. It's important to recognize that self-care stems from self-consciousness and self-awareness. Knowing that my context matters in order for me to understand the context of another. By leading wellness within, we're able to embody this and make us care about the other even more and even better than we have already done. The box that we stand in, if we step out, allows us to see and observe ourselves from afar. Stepping back into that is also a process of self-care. You recognize the roles, you reflect on your state, and you respond through an action base, finding what works for you, what manner of self-care will allow you to be happy in that moment. I personally went through these 3 R's and I hold them dear to me because they're simple, they're easy to remember. Recognizing, reflecting, and responding. By recognizing my role, I realized that more than my professional responsibility in school, guiding students and helping them make a decision, I was more than just that role. I was a daughter, a provider. I was a sister. I was a best friend. I was a young adult still finding my purpose in life. By reckoning with these realities and roles, I managed to see how far and how much I carry. By journaling and reflecting, I managed to tap into my passions that I've forgotten. From the literary works that I remember reading, classics in PNU, to the Shakespearean sonnets that I used to teach, or the poems like Ithaca and Invictus that we used to discuss in my literature classes. I realized that now I witness living libraries. The students that I talk to, people that I meet, they themselves are narratives walking with life lessons, emotions that I could relate to, connections that are meaningful. And by reflecting on that, I realized that I needed to express my own feelings. I'm not a dancer nor a singer, but I loved writing and I love creating something. And my response to that was finding a safe medium, a safe place for me to express myself. I rediscovered my love for poetry and started writing and produce a concrete, tangible product. The words through blackout poetry allowed me to redefine the stories in my mind and refine them and make them into a new poem, concretized through acrylic sheets in layers of memory and emotions into an art piece. And that's how I discovered art. I discovered that I can be an artist, and that was my self-care. In moments where I felt everything was too much and I was at the point of burning out, I paused and reflected. Then I started creating. It became a space for me to take care of me and just express myself without the fear of judgment, nor the pressure or the responsibilities that I carry. Because the responsibilities will stay and be there. All I'm doing is I'm pausing for myself and creating a moment for me. And that's what art did for me. Muffet further said in her book that self-care is a manner of being consistent to the deepest resonance and rhythm of life. Imagine, in order for you to resonate with the rhythm of your life and the heartbeat and the core of your happiness, you need to find the time to do so. Gu and Day in 2013 explained a study that teacher resilience is not really the capacity for teachers to survive, but rather it's the capacity for them to embrace the adversity. This adversity, or this sense of urgency to respond to the realities of the student and their own personal realities, is what creates the gap and the challenge. But the world that they're trying to teach in, the world that they're in, clash because it becomes too difficult to understand where the student's coming from because they themselves have realities to reconcile with. In every world that the teacher teaches in, they must first understand their own in order for them to understand the context of the other. Educators are at the precipice of that question. How do I understand the other if I don't understand myself? I often think about all these new phones and watches or digital watches that say they're water resistant. But no matter how resistant one thing is, it only resists to a certain point. A bamboo often is used as a symbol of resilience. But if a bamboo bends 1,000 times, and that's its limit, come 1001, it will break. Teachers are the same. Teachers are not stress resistant. They're not pain resistant or burnt out resistant. They're not stress proof or burnt out proof. Breaking is a sign that other care and self-care is not in equilibrium. And that's the greatest challenge that we face in the education system. How do we reconcile that in this caring industry, the carers themselves need to care for themselves? Self-care and other care is valuable in this care pedagogy. Caring for other and caring for self must always be in equilibrium. It's essential for us to care for oneself in order to care for another. To understand the concept of the other by making sure that we are ready and are capable, that we have enough headspace to understand and feel for the other. Or else, if our cup is overflowing and we are unable to manage it, it spills over and creates learning encounters that are not fully meaningful, but just encounters for the sake of encounters. The core of being an educator is embracing the concept of being in a caring industry. And oftentimes we hear the word pananagutan. I asked a friend who works as a professor in Kagawaran, and he told me that pananagutan means you are responsible for another. Oftentimes, we look at teaching or caring as a pananagutan, a responsibility out of love to understand the other. And in order for us to understand the other, we must understand ourselves. Self-care is important. Don't forget to eat. Empathic communication, active listening, and tones matter. By not forgetting to eat, you'll also be able to take care of yourself by remembering the 3 R's. The process of recognizing your roles, the process of reflecting and pausing, and responding by acting on how you would want to take care of yourself. I hope you learned something from me today. Thank you for listening and journeying with me and witnessing to the living library of caring. May you continue to care for others as you care for yourself. What is essential is invisible to the eye. That's one of the famous lines in my favorite book, The Little Prince. This past few years, we've been hearing the words essential or essential worker. Teachers have been dubbed as an essential worker. But part and parcel of being an essential worker is that you have to take care of other people. You are so essential that even with a pandemic, your care is necessary. But in that struggle of caring for others, we find that big gap and that big question of how about caring for myself? This past few minutes, I hope you managed to pick up some tips on how to improve your empathy and how to improve the other care that we do as educators. At the same time, I hope you discover what's the best way of recognizing, responding, through reflection, your own self-care. Sa muli, ako si Christine Lining Bulandus at sumainyo ang PNU Talks. See you!